Howdy y'all, I'm Anna with Always Right, and welcome back to the 12 Days of Christmas. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you 10 tips to write a book in 2024. Now this video concept is not original by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I was inspired by Sarah Lubrat. Every year she does a video where she shares 10 tips to write a book in that year. Like in 2022, there was 10 tips for writing a book in 2022, and so on and so forth. The 10 tips that I'm going to be sharing with you are 10 tips that I need to remind myself of this year while I'm writing my novel. And the very first tip is going to be to set a goal for yourself. If your goal is to write a book in 2024, that's great. Congratulations, you've done tip 1. Kind of joking. I wish it was that simple. Once you've set your goal, you need to break that goal down into bite-sized pieces, because having on like your goal wall over here, write a novel, is terrifying, it is thick, it's ambiguous, and it's daunting. And daunting things are hard to do. So let's take this daunting task of write a novel in 2024 and break it down into its parts. How you do that is you kind of need to guesstimate how long you want your novel to be. The average queryable novel is between 70,000 and 100,000 words. For the purposes of this video, we're gonna assume that you're gonna do an 80,000 word novel. Why? Because it's easier to break down than 70,000. So for an 80,000 word novel, every quarter, every 3 months, you need to have 20,000 words done. So for each week, you need to be writing about 1,667 words to achieve your 80,000 word novel by the end of the year. That's a lot more achievable. And remember, 1 page a day will result in a 365-page novel at the end of a year. You just need to break that giant task of writing a novel into bite-sized pieces, into manageable chunks. Tip number 2 is that you need to realize that there is no such thing as a perfect writing time. If you have time to write, then write. If you have a long stretch of time to write, I highly recommend you do writing sprints so that you're hyper-focusing yourself on just completing that one task, not giving yourself a 3-hour blanket of, oh, I can write, and then you go off and you do your dishes, you do your laundry, you sweep. It's amazing how enticing house chores become when you've got to write. Or when you have time to write. If you have 10 minutes alone, just, by yourself, no one else in the house, just you, for those 10 minutes, pop your computer, pop your phone, pop your free write out, and write. There are so many people that use those tiny pockets of time to write entire novels. This tip is very pertinent for me because I currently have quite a bit of free time to write, and you guessed it, I'm not using all that free time to write. I have found so many little additional things to do. Write when you can, and if you have a long period of time that you can write, instead of looking at your computer and going, yeah, I've got 3 hours, I can write, tell yourself, I only have 25 minutes that I can write right now. Do that writing sprint for those full 25 minutes. Then go do something productive for 10, 15 minutes, whether it's laundry, dishes, going to the store, getting your medicines, whatever. Then come back and do another 25-minute sprint. If you treat every minute you're writing like you only have 25 minutes, you only have 10 minutes to write, you will be producing words on your page. Tip number 3, work on weaning yourself off your phone. This is a huge tip that will also help you if you have a reading goal that you feel is unachievable. Our phones run our lives for the most part. I don't know about you, but my screen time is an ungodly amount. Either just straight up delete the distractions off your phone, whether that's TikTok or Reddit or Twitter or whatever the heck else you youth are doing, like Instagram, I guess that's one. Remove those temptations from your phone if you can. If you can't, or you really, really don't want to, and you pinky promise that you'll work on your screen time I've done this before. Put limits on your apps that you use a lot. Treat yourself like a child, because humans at their core want to eat and sleep and something else that's not coming to mind. And that's about it. The less calories you have to spend, the less energy you have to exert, usually the happier our little monkey lizard brains are. Delete those distracting apps, and if that's not something that you feel that you could do, set the limits on your phone like you're a child. In fact, a lot of my advice revolves around treating yourself like you're a child. Tip number 4, and this is kind of a theme, look at your first draft like a kid wrote it. You know, it may ramble a bit, it may have some inaccuracies, may not be totally great, and it might jump around a little bit. But you know what? It's a first draft. That's what it's supposed to be. It's okay if your first draft reads like an excited 7-year-old telling you about their favorite Pokemon and their favorite episode of like Bluey. That's fine, because the goal is to get those words on that page. Heck, let your excited 7-year-old self write for a little bit. But really, your first draft won't be perfect. And this has been one of the biggest adjustments for myself, because I was that girl in college that would just like write a rough draft, leave it alone for maybe 6-8 hours, go back, correct the grammar, submit it, and make high 90s on it without trying. It's hard to go from being able to write really well-graded papers, documents, whatever in college, to all of a sudden I'm trying to write this novel and this chapter just will not work with me. These characters just aren't behaving. Your novel is so much bigger than most likely any paper you wrote in college. And dare I say, it's a bit more complicated. You've got plot, you've got a lot of characters, you've got like symbolism, you've got X, Y, Z going on here, and like here it was like clearly outlined like what the professor wanted from you. Tip number 5, be nice to yourself. You are doing a crazy hard task of trying to write a novel this year, and you just need to remember to be nice to yourself. And this does kind of tie back to like a first draft not being perfect, but also you can be understanding about yourself. You may not be able to hit that 1,700 word goal this week. That's fine. You had the flu, you had cold, Nana died. Things happen in our lives that we don't always have control over. So just remember to be kind to yourself. Tip number 6 is to remember to read. Yes, it is so easy to get caught up in the world you're imagining, the world you're creating on your document, in your book. It's so easy to get wrapped up in that and just forget, other things exist. But I highly recommend you still read while you're writing, as well as consume some other forms of media. You never know where you're gonna find inspiration for the next scene. Tip number 7, create a visual haven for yourself. This can be like a physical collage, that you make with newspaper clippings and like magazine clippings or whatever. Or this could be like a Pinterest board. Just have pictures or elements or even things that just inspire you, that remind you of the book you're writing, that remind you of the characters, that remind you of the settings. Also, sometimes when you're writing, your brain and work too good, and it just decides to kind of short circuit and go, oh my God, what is the word for this? What is this? I can't remember the word for even this. So yeah, it's okay to give yourself a break and create a little haven for yourself where you can just look at pretty things, look at things that like scratch that itch in your storytelling mind. Tip number 8, don't wait on inspiration to write. Inspiration is just as fickle as luck. And you know what? You're probably not gonna be inspired to write even 10 days this year. You're not guaranteed anything. She is fickle, she's got a tight schedule, and you know what? You missed your chance, you missed your chance. So learn how to inspire yourself with writing sprints and deadlines and goals. That's one reason that this tip is so low on the list, is because all these other elements should really aid you and supplement you when inspiration isn't an option. Tip number 9, know that you do not have to write in total chronological order. What I mean by this is, like, if you are currently in the first 20% of your book and you have this midpoint turn just pop into your head and just go me, it might be okay if you write that one, the one that you are inspired to write. That's totally acceptable. That's totally fine. Just know that you shouldn't write all of the really exciting bits first, because then you're gonna leave yourself with the bits you didn't want to write. And trust me when I say that those bits are hard to go back to once you've only been writing these action-packed, super fun, super exciting scenes. Yeah, maybe hold off on the super exciting scenes as rewards for yourself. Oh, I wrote 7,000 words today. You know what? Claps all around. I get to write this scene tomorrow that I've been dying to write. And another kind of note, if you don't know how to move something forward in your book and you're sitting there day in, day out, unable to progress it naturally, you can totally just use brackets and bold it and do all caps and put something like insert deep conversation and just move on with your writing. It would really help your second draft self if you did have everything completed. If for the life of you just can't get Janice and Eugene to have a decent conversation right now because just not in that headspace for that kind of a conversation in the book, you can do brackets with insert deep conversation here or whatever. Technically, it is your book and the goal is to finish it. It's okay if you have a few spots where you just use brackets. And the last tip number 10, is stay focused on your project/book. I don't mean this in a mean way, but if you're writing your first ever novel, maybe don't be writing 2 or 3 others on the side. Just stay focused on the one novel, because you learn so much about yourself and the writing process when you finish that first novel. And it's so much better to have a completed first draft of one book instead of 2 or 3 partial drafts of 2 or 3 books. Because then you're not achieving your goal. Yeah, you may have written 70,000 words for the year, but you didn't achieve your goal. And that's kind of a yikes in the yard, fam. But these have been my 10 tips for writing a novel this year. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. And as always, let's get writing. Bye. Who is she? Guys, we centered the table. And I realized, Wyatt has never been centered before.